They were icons, legends who once commanded the stage and screen with unmatched power, style, and grace. But behind the spotlight, many of these black stars faced a darker truth, a battle that raged far from the cameras. For some, alcohol was an escape. For others, it was a slow poison that consumed everything they built: their fame, their families, even their lives. From heartbreaking downfalls to explosive public meltdowns, these are the black actors whose constant struggle with drinking left scars far deeper than Hollywood ever dared to show. Billie Holiday, the voice that broke its own heart. Billie Holiday, forever known as Lady Day, wasn't just one of the greatest jazz singers to ever live. She was the sound of heartbreak itself. Every note she sang carried the ache of a woman who had lived too much, too soon. But behind that velvet voice was a lifelong war she could never escape, the war with alcohol. This wasn't some passing phase or indulgence. It was a shadow that followed her from her teenage years to her final breath. Growing up in poverty, surrounded by pain, abuse, and neglect, Billie found her escape at the bottom of a glass. It dulled the hurt, numbed the memories, and gave her the illusion of peace. By the time she began performing in smoky Harlem clubs, alcohol was as much a part of her world as the music itself. In that scene, drinking was survival. Nerves were soothed with gin, loneliness drowned in whiskey. Billie believed the bottle gave her courage, that it loosened her voice and freed her soul. But over time, it took everything it once seemed to give. The tragedy was cruelly poetic. The same drink that calmed her tremors slowly stole her voice, her gift, her power, her identity. She tried to stop. She wanted to stop. But one glass was never enough. And when heroin entered her life, the spiral deepened into chaos. Arrests, scandals, broken promises, her story became a slow-motion heartbreak. Friends begged her to get help, but she either pushed them away or found her way back to the same dark comfort. On stage, she sometimes stumbled, her once golden voice cracking, her eyes distant. Yet even in her fragility, audiences loved her. They saw the pain in her songs because it was real. As her fame faded, her body began to collapse under the weight of it all. Her liver failed, her heart weakened, and her once luminous presence dimmed. Doctors warned that another drink could kill her, but addiction has its own gravity. In the summer of 1959, as Billie lay dying in a hospital bed, frail, heartbroken, her veins scarred from years of abuse, police handcuffed her for drug possession. Even then, she found ways to sneak alcohol past the guards. A few weeks later, Lady Day was gone. Just 44 years old. Her voice, once a torch for the lonely and the broken, fell silent. But the echoes never faded. Every time you hear her sing Strange Fruit or Good Morning Heartache, it's as if she's still there, whispering from the edge of eternity, a reminder that even in destruction, beauty can endure. Richard Pryor, the genius who couldn't escape his own demons. Richard Pryor, the man who made the world laugh until it cried, lived a life that was anything but funny. Behind the lights, the laughter, and the legend, he was waging a private war against his greatest enemy, himself. Born into chaos, Pryor's earliest memories were steeped in pain. In the rough streets where he grew up, alcohol was everywhere, both a comfort and a curse. By the time fame found him in the 1970s, the bottle was already his closest companion. Hollywood only made it worse. Comedy clubs, late-night parties, endless tours. The world's funniest man was drowning in whiskey and vodka, mixing it all with cocaine in a desperate attempt to silence his ghosts. He used to say drinking made him funnier, looser on stage. But it wasn't laughter he was chasing, it was relief. Beneath every punchline hid a wound that never healed, a childhood scarred by abuse, loneliness, and heartbreak. Friends described him as magnetic 1 minute and terrifying the next, laughter turning to rage in seconds. His relationships crumbled under the weight of addiction as he pushed away everyone who tried to save him. Then came the night that nearly ended it all. In 1980, high and drunk, Richard set himself on fire, literally. Flames engulfed his body, and by some miracle he survived. He called it a wake-up call. For a while, he tried to change. But addiction doesn't let go easily. The cycle of relapse and regret followed him for years. By the time he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, the damage was irreversible. His once electric body was failing, his hands trembling, his voice weaker. Doctors said decades of hard drinking had destroyed his liver and nervous system. Yet through it all, his humor, raw, honest, and painfully human, never died. Richard Pryor was more than a comedian. He was a mirror to the human soul. A man who turned his suffering into laughter, even as that laughter came from a place of deep, unhealed pain. His story is not just about fame or tragedy, it's about the price of brilliance when the light burns too bright, too fast, for too long. Whitney Houston wasn't just a singer, she was the voice. A once-in-a-lifetime talent whose sound defined a generation and whose presence lit up every stage she touched. But behind the spotlight, the fame, and the endless applause, Whitney was fighting a battle that never truly ended, a quiet war with alcohol that slowly consumed her brilliance. In the early years, she was the picture of perfection, polished, poised, and pure. But as the weight of superstardom grew heavier, the endless tours, exhausting interviews, and relentless media pressure, the cracks began to show. Alcohol crept into her life like a shadow, offering comfort she could never quite resist. What started as a way to unwind soon became a constant companion. Friends whispered that she rarely stopped at 1 or 2 drinks. Backstage, at parties, even before major events, the glass was always close. The cruel irony? The very thing that soothed her was also destroying the gift the world adored most. A voice like Whitney's demanded care, rest, control, restraint. But the more she drank, the more her golden voice began to fade, trembling under the strain. Still she tried. She entered rehab more than once, spoke honestly about her struggles, and fought hard to reclaim her peace. Yet, between her turbulent marriage to Bobby Brown and the crushing loneliness that fame so often brings, sobriety was a mountain few could climb alone. Behind closed doors, the battles grew darker. Friends remembered nights when Whitney didn't drink to celebrate, she drank to forget, to numb the pain fame had carved into her soul. By the late 2000s, the toll was unmistakable. Her once radiant energy dimmed, her voice no longer soared as effortlessly. But she never gave up. Music was her refuge, even as her demons closed in. Then came 2012, the year the world stood still. Found lifeless in a Beverly Hills hotel room, Whitney's death confirmed what so many had feared: alcohol and other substances had followed her to the very end. Whitney Houston reached a level of greatness most can only dream of. Yet she was also a reminder of how fragile even the brightest stars can be. Her story is both dazzling and devastating, proof that behind the glitter of fame, the shadows can be deep and sometimes impossible to escape. Samuel L. Jackson stands today as one of Hollywood's most iconic and respected actors, but his road to success was anything but smooth. Long before fame, red carpets, and blockbuster hits, Jackson was fighting a war most never saw, a deadly struggle with drugs and alcohol that nearly claimed his life. He's spoken openly about those dark years, admitting that if he hadn't sought help when he did, he might not be alive today. His troubles began young. What started as casual drinking in college soon became a habit during his early acting years. At first, it felt harmless, a way to fit in, calm his nerves, and boost his confidence. But what began as a comfort quickly turned into a crutch. By the time he was chasing roles in New York, the bottle wasn't just nearby, it ruled him. He drank before rehearsals, after rehearsals, and deep into the night. Soon, alcohol wasn't enough. Drugs entered the picture, and the cycle grew darker. He'd start using in the morning and keep going until he passed out, telling himself it didn't affect his work. But it did. Forgotten lines, missed calls, and reckless behavior began to destroy the opportunities he worked so hard for. His wife, LaTanya, and their young daughter watched helplessly as the man they loved disappeared behind addiction. The breaking point came one night when they found him collapsed on the kitchen floor after another binge. That moment shattered the illusion. He needed help or he wouldn't survive. Rehab was the turning point. Inside those walls, Samuel confronted his demons head-on. He realized this wasn't just about bad choices, it was about pain, insecurity, and pressure to belong. Choosing sobriety became his act of defiance against everything that once held him down. With a clear mind and renewed discipline, Samuel L. Jackson rose like a man reborn. His talent, now unclouded, shined brighter than ever. And only after conquering addiction did his career truly ignite, proving that his greatest triumph wasn't just on screen, it was survival itself. Ray Charles wasn't just a musician, he was a storm in human form. A man who could make a piano cry, laugh, and scream all in one song. His genius reshaped American music, but behind those soulful notes lay a war no melody could heal, a lifelong battle with addiction. Everyone knows about Ray's struggle with heroin, but few realize that alcohol was the ghost that never left him. Even after he kicked heroin, the bottle lingered like a shadow he couldn't shake. From the start, the music world was soaked in liquor, long nights, smoky clubs, and endless tours where sleep was a luxury and loneliness a constant. For a blind man navigating fame and fatigue, a drink wasn't just for fun, it was a momentary escape from the noise, the pressure, and the emptiness that fame couldn't fill. When heroin nearly destroyed him, Ray swore to break free, and he did. But like many who've walked that hard road, he traded one demon for another. Alcohol became his quiet substitute, a softer poison that still numbed his pain. He tried to hide it, but his bandmates could see the cracks, the slurred words, the glass in his hand before a show, the slow fade of a man once unstoppable. His raw talent could mask the damage for a while, but not forever. Offstage, drinking strained his relationships and clouded his focus. The industry that once adored him could turn cold in an instant, and every slip threatened to chip away at his legend. Though Ray learned to keep his drinking under control, it was never gone. It followed him like a whisper through the years, a reminder that victory over one addiction didn't mean peace. Even after conquering heroin, Ray Charles was still fighting, not against the world, but against the loneliness, the temptation, and the ghosts that haunted his genius. Diana Ross, the battle behind the glamour. Diana Ross will forever dazzle as one of music's most glamorous and legendary icons. Yet, behind the sparkling gowns and timeless performances lay a truth far more human, a struggle that fame could never conceal. For years, Diana silently wrestled with an addiction to alcohol, a shadow that followed her even under the brightest spotlight. In her early days with the Supremes, she was the epitome of grace, discipline, and focus, a perfectionist who demanded excellence from herself and everyone around her. But when she stepped out on her own, the pressures of superstardom began to take their toll. Endless tours, sleepless nights, and the constant expectation to remain flawless chipped away at her spirit. What began as an occasional drink to unwind soon became an escape, a way to quiet the chaos and numb the pain that success couldn't soothe. Friends remember moments when Diana would drink before interviews, or even before taking the stage, her radiant energy fading into moments of distance and distraction. The whispers turned into headlines when her private battle burst into public view. In 2002, the world was stunned when news broke that Diana Ross had been arrested for DUI in Arizona. The headlines weren't just shocking, they were heartbreaking. This wasn't a rising star caught in scandal. This was Diana Ross, the ultimate diva, brought down by her own demons. Her blood alcohol level was over the legal limit that night, and the illusion of perfection shattered. Diana entered rehab soon after, but recovery proved to be a winding road. Alcohol had become her emotional armor, a shield against heartbreak, career pressures, and the loneliness of fame. Those close to her spoke of her unpredictable moods, one moment joyful and invincible, the next withdrawn or fragile. Yet, through the storms, Diana Ross never stopped fighting. Over the years, she's found moments of peace, healing, and rediscovery. Her story is more than one of beauty and fame, it's a story of survival. A reminder that even legends bleed, that behind the glamour and grace, Diana Ross remains profoundly human, a woman who faced her darkness and still found the strength to shine. Tracy Morgan, laughter through the darkness. Tracy Morgan, the wild, unpredictable force who made audiences roar on Saturday Night Live and 30 Rock, wasn't always laughing behind the curtain. Beneath the punchlines and that larger-than-life personality was a man quietly fighting a dangerous battle, one with alcohol. It wasn't just a bad habit, it was a slow, consuming storm that nearly cost him everything. In the beginning, drinking was just part of the grind. After late-night gigs, he'd party like every rising comic chasing the high of applause. But what started as celebrations soon turned into dependence. The fun blurred into chaos. Then came the headlines, DUI arrests, mugshots, and public embarrassment. Fans who once laughed at his jokes now watched in disbelief as their favorite comedian spiraled. Each time, Tracy swore he'd change. But addiction isn't something you just walk away from. It drags you down, piece by piece. The deeper he sank, the more his health, relationships, and reputation crumbled. The same energy that made him hilarious on stage made him volatile off it. Sometimes joyful, sometimes explosive, and sometimes completely lost. Eventually, Tracy couldn't hide from the truth any longer. He checked into rehab, where he faced the mirror and the man he'd become. There, he learned that alcohol wasn't his enemy, it was his escape. From stress, from depression, from pain. And slowly, he began to rebuild. Sobriety didn't give him a perfect life, it gave him a second chance. A chance to rise again, not as the loudest man in the room, but as one who finally understood his own silence. Tracy Morgan often says recovery isn't something you finish, it's a choice you make every single day. And for him, every laugh since has been a reminder of the life he fought so hard to reclaim. Billy D. Williams. Behind the cool, a battle within. Billy D. Williams, the smooth-talking legend who forever defined charm as Lando Calrissian in Star Wars, seemed to have it all. The fame, the fortune, the effortless charisma that made him a symbol of style and confidence. But behind that signature smile and polished image, Billy D was fighting a silent war that almost cost him everything: alcohol addiction. He later admitted that drinking didn't just slow his career, it stole golden opportunities right from under him. In the glittering world of 1970s and 80s Hollywood, success came wrapped in temptation, late-night parties, endless celebrations, and an open bar at every turn. What started as a way to loosen up after a long shoot slowly turned into a crutch he couldn't live without. At first, it gave him courage, the kind that made lines flow smoother and laughter come easier. But soon, the bottle began taking more than it ever gave. He'd show up to set exhausted from the night before, the sparkle dimmed, the timing off. And in Hollywood, where professionalism is everything, that kind of slip doesn't go unnoticed. The consequences crept into his personal life too. Heated arguments, lost friendships, emotional distance from the people he loved most. The world saw Billy D, the icon, but behind closed doors, he was just a man trying to outrun his own demons. Eventually, he reached a breaking point. He realized that if he didn't take control, the addiction that once seemed harmless would destroy everything he'd built. So he made a choice, to stop running and face the truth. The journey wasn't easy. Recovery never is. But through discipline, honesty, and a renewed sense of purpose, he began to reclaim what mattered most: his health, his art, and his peace. When Billy D later spoke about his struggles, it wasn't for pity. It was for power. To remind the world that even legends have battles, and that true strength isn't in never falling, but in finding the courage to rise again. Florence Ballard, the forgotten voice of the Supremes. Florence Ballard was more than just a singer, she was the soul of the Supremes, the voice that helped define an era and shape one of the most legendary girl groups in music history. With her thunderous vocals and radiant smile, Florence seemed destined for a lifetime of applause. But behind the glitter and glamour, her story slowly unraveled into heartbreak and tragedy, her greatest enemy not a rival, but the bottle that offered comfort she could never truly find. In the beginning, Florence was the fire that fueled the Supremes' rise. Her laughter filled rehearsal rooms, her spirit unstoppable. But as fame tightened its grip, the spotlight began to shift. Diana Ross was pushed to the front, and Florence, the heart of the group, was quietly pushed aside. That loss cut deep. Watching her dream slip away while the world celebrated others was a wound that never healed. At first, alcohol was her escape, a way to numb the pain of rejection. But one drink became many, and soon, it became her silent companion. In an industry built on illusion and late-night temptations, her struggles only grew worse. Missed rehearsals. Slurred performances. A once brilliant voice dulled by despair. By 1967, Motown had enough. Florence Ballard was forced out of the group she helped create. That cruel dismissal sent her into a downward spiral. She tried to rebuild as a solo artist, but the industry that once adored her had already moved on. The cheers faded, the lights dimmed, and poverty took the place of fame. Depression tightened its grip. Alcohol became her only refuge, eroding her health and spirit. By the mid-1970s, the woman who once stood center stage in sequins and spotlight was now living in near poverty, her body frail, her voice silenced. On February 22, 1976, Florence Ballard, just 32 years old, died of cardiac arrest. Official reports didn't blame alcohol directly, but years of heavy drinking had left her body broken and vulnerable. She was the voice that helped build the Supremes, yet her name was nearly erased from the story. Florence Ballard's life remains a haunting reminder of how quickly dreams can be devoured by fame, and how even the brightest stars can fade in silence. Marvin Gaye, the voice that cried for help. Marvin Gaye, the world's beloved prince of Motown, gave us anthems that still stir the soul. Let's Get It On, What's Going On, Sexual Healing. His voice could melt pain into poetry. But behind that velvet tone and effortless charm, Marvin was waging a private war, one his fame and talent couldn't shield him from addiction. As the lights of stardom burned brighter, so did the shadows in his life. What began as a few drinks to calm his nerves or escape the madness of the road turned into something darker. By the late 70s, friends said Marvin would drink from morning until night, drowning his genius in bottles that numbed the pain but deepened the despair. Alcohol became more than a habit. It was a lifeline he couldn't let go of, a silent partner to his growing drug use and emotional turmoil. The effects were devastating. Concerts were canceled. Studio sessions stretched on for weeks. Behind every electrifying performance stood a man breaking piece by piece. Alcohol didn't just dull his senses, it amplified his demons, the depression, the anger, the volatile clashes with his father that grew more explosive over time. Even when Marvin fled to Europe in search of peace, sobriety remained just out of reach. Each moment of recovery was followed by another heartbreaking relapse. By the early 1980s, Marvin's brilliance was shadowed by instability and emotional chaos. Those who loved him could see the toll, the exhaustion, the fear, the slow unraveling of a soul once so full of light. Then came April 1, 1984. After one final, fiery argument with his father, the unthinkable happened. Marvin Gaye was shot and killed in the very home where his voice had first been heard. Alcohol didn't pull the trigger, but it poisoned the path that led him there, corroding trust, fueling rage, and clouding his judgment until tragedy struck. Marvin's story remains both a masterpiece and a warning, the tale of a man who gave the world songs of peace and love while silently battling a storm that would ultimately take him away. Eddie Griffin isn't just a comedian or actor, he's a storm of energy, intellect, and raw honesty wrapped in one unforgettable presence. But behind that infectious laughter lies a man whose face demons most would never dare to reveal. For years, Eddie battled alcohol addiction, a quiet war that left scars far deeper than fame could ever heal. It started innocently, the way it does for many. A drink to celebrate, another to unwind, and soon, one to escape. In the entertainment world, where nights stretch endlessly and applause can't always silence the noise inside, alcohol became a dangerous companion. At first, no one noticed. The jokes still landed, the charm still shined. But slowly, celebration turned into dependence. Those closest to him saw both sides of the man behind the mic. One moment, the life of the party. The next, unpredictable and distant. That's the cruel power of addiction. It doesn't just dull pain, it reshapes who you are. Eddie himself has spoken openly about the toll it took. Missed cues, off nights, and the lingering fog that made the sharpest minds stumble. For a performer like Eddie Griffin, whose art depends on precision and presence, alcohol wasn't just a vice, it was an enemy. A shadow lurking behind the laughter, threatening to destroy the very gift that made the world love him. And yet, acknowledging that struggle became his redemption, proof that even those who make us laugh the hardest often fight the hardest battles within. Paul Mooney, the battle behind the laughs. Born in Peoria, Illinois, where half the town now calls him a legend and the other half still calls him Daddy, Paul Mooney grew into one of comedy's most fearless, unapologetic voices. An actor, writer, and stand-up genius, he rubbed shoulders with the biggest names in the game. But long before the spotlight found him, Paul was locked in a quiet war that nearly stole his future: alcohol. Like many young performers, it started harmlessly enough. A drink before a late-night set, a toast after a tough show. In the smoky haze of comedy clubs, it felt like part of the ritual. That first sip took the edge off, made the crowd seem less intimidating. But what began as a comfort soon became a crutch. The drink that once gave him courage began to rob him of clarity. His timing slipped. His spark dimmed. The audience might not have noticed, but Paul did, and so did the ones who worked beside him. Night after night, he leaned on the bottle not for fun, but to survive the grind of an unforgiving industry. The toll came quietly, in his health, his focus, his reliability. And for a man who prided himself on precision and truth, that was a breaking point. Admitting the problem was brutal. But Mooney, ever the realist, knew that if he didn't confront it, he'd lose everything he'd built. So he did what he'd always done, faced the truth head-on. No punchline, no mask, just raw honesty. And in doing so, he reclaimed not just his craft, but his voice, sharper, wiser, and more fearless than ever. Nina Simone, the woman behind the voice. Nina Simone, forever hailed as the high priestess of soul, possessed a voice that could pierce through silence and stir the deepest corners of the human heart. But behind that magnetic brilliance was a woman fighting invisible wars, emotional wounds, mental anguish, and a loneliness that fame could never cure. For Nina, alcohol wasn't just a habit. It was a shield, a fragile defense against the storms raging inside her. From childhood, she had lived under impossible pressure. Trained as a classical pianist, she was told perfection wasn't a goal, it was the only option. And when her voice made her famous, that pressure only grew. The endless touring, the sting of racism, the heartbreak of failed love, the weight of always being on, it all began to crush her spirit. At first, a drink helped her cope, a little courage before the spotlight. But soon, it became something darker. Friends recalled how she'd take a sip before walking on stage, convinced it steadied her nerves. Yet, over time, the bottle turned traitor, causing her to miss shows, forget lyrics, and spiral into public outbursts that left audiences stunned. Beneath it all, Nina wrestled with demons no one could see: depression, mood swings, and what many now recognize as bipolar disorder. The alcohol that once calmed her began to feed the chaos, amplifying her rage, her sorrow, her despair. It cost her opportunities, friendships, and her once unshakable reputation. But to Nina, it was never just about drinking. It was about drowning the ache of being misunderstood, exploited, and burdened with genius in a world that refused to see her humanity. Even in her later years, when she sought peace in foreign lands, the bottle followed her like a ghost she could never outrun. Nina Simone's voice changed music forever, but behind the curtain, she was a woman fighting to stay whole. Fragile yet fearless, broken yet unbowed. Her story is a haunting reminder that even the strongest voices can come from the deepest pain. Don Cornelius, the man who taught America how to feel the beat. Don Cornelius wasn't just the smooth-voiced host of Soul Train. He was the architect of a cultural revolution. Week after week, he brought black music, fashion, and pride straight into America's living rooms, giving a generation a mirror in which they could finally see themselves shine. On screen, his world glowed with rhythm and style, velvet suits, wide smiles, and the echo of love, peace, and soul. But behind that polished smile, the man who built a dream was quietly unraveling. Running Soul Train was no small feat. Don carried the full weight of it, The deals, the deadlines, the egos, the endless pressure to keep the show alive. To silence the storm inside, he poured himself a drink. One glass to take the edge off became 2, then 3. Soon, the bottle was no longer a companion, it was a chain. Friends recalled the change. The charm that once lit up rooms gave way to mood swings, long silences, and bursts of anger. The man who celebrated life and rhythm began to fade into the shadows of his own creation. Then came the health scares. In the late 1980s, brain surgery left him weakened, physically and emotionally. Recovery was slow, and alcohol became both his comfort and his curse. Each sip blurred the pain but deepened the damage. By the 2000s, the cracks in his private life had become public. Legal troubles, fueled by the same addiction that haunted him, began to tarnish the legend he had built. The man who once stood for pride and progress was now fighting demons that no camera could capture. On February 1, 2012, the world lost Don Cornelius, not just to tragedy, but to the silent suffering that fame too often hides. He left behind a complicated legacy, a visionary who gave Black culture its stage, yet couldn't escape his own despair. His story is a haunting reminder, even the brightest lights can flicker in darkness. And sometimes, the strongest voices are the ones crying out in silence. Robin Harris, the laugh that hid the pain. Robin Harris wasn't just a comedian, he was a storm on stage. A whirlwind of energy, attitude, and raw truth. With razor-sharp wit, a booming voice, and his now legendary BBS Kids routine, Robin didn't just tell jokes, he commanded the room. Every punchline hit like lightning, leaving crowds gasping for air between laughs. But behind the laughter was a man burning the candle at both ends. His rise in Hollywood was fast, furious, and fueled by the nightlife. Comedy clubs, late-night shows, endless tours. Robin lived for the crowd, and the crowd lived for him. Yet after the curtain fell, the quiet was deafening. That's when the drinks started flowing. At first, alcohol was his way to unwind, a small reward after killing it on stage. But soon, it became his constant companion. Before the show, after the show, sometimes even during. Friends began to notice the change. The exhaustion in his eyes. The labored breathing. The man who made everyone laugh was slowly wearing himself down. Fame had found him, but so had pressure. The pressure to stay funny. To stay fresh. To stay relevant in a Hollywood that chews up talent faster than it celebrates it. And when the stress got too heavy, the bottle was always there, waiting. What felt like relief was really poison, working its way through his body, one drink at a time. By his early 30s, the signs were there: high blood pressure, fatigue, and a heart struggling to keep up with the life he was living. But Robin pushed on. Because the show had to go on. Until one March morning in 1990, it didn't. Robin Harris died in his sleep at just 36 years old. Officially, it was heart failure. Unofficially, it was a life lived too hard, too fast, and too full. A tragic reminder that even those who make the world laugh the loudest often battle the deepest silence inside. His story stands as a warning and a legacy. The world lost a giant of comedy far too soon. And if you thought the story was shocking, stay tuned. The next one might just leave you speechless.